Bitcoin at 104,000.
It's craziness.
All right, so there you go.
Is it here's a question for you. Is it a currency? What is Bitcoin? Why don't you tell us what Bitcoin is?
I was listening to the Chuck Odds on the news going down this morning in the car, and it's so funny. So all of us went to this extent. When Bitcoin went from 2,000 to 10,000, it was a Ponzi scheme.
It was a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, it probably went back to 2,000 before it went to 100,000. And so many of these people who were like, this is incredible, are now some of the biggest advocates of it. Mm-hmm. Is it a store of value? Yes. I don't know quite. It obviously, it has the aspects of a currency. It's a store of value. It fluctuates in value. The decentralized ledger piece is freeing you from someone controlling that currency, like a government. So does it have currency-like aspects to it? Yes. I think that, I think like for any currency, the use case has to prove itself out. I don't quite know. And, I will be met with a lot of smarter people who know much more about this. Well, the use case is already being demonstrated in 30 different ways. Mm-hmm. I don't quite know where the use case is. I mean, we've looked at blockchain for clearing transactions, and there's a lag in that. You and I have done some work on this, specifically of the lag in things hitting the blockchain. And does that work when we're trying to clear in real time? Mm-hmm. Are those things that are, fixable or will come? I probably, yes. And mm-hmm. Does this get us a route to true 24/7 trading? I think this will be a gateway for us. So that use case will become very powerful for it. I don't know from my very cheap seats of not really understanding this as well as I should to speak to the use case of it. Should I hold euro, sterling, and Bitcoin? To an extent, they're all representations of the value of fiat. I mean, is it a fiat currency? They argue it's not fiat mm-hmm. because there's something backing it. And what's backing it is the blockchain, if I understand correctly, in terms of the guarantee of performance.
I think the defined amount of it is what partially backs it as well, right?
You mean the finite supply?
Yeah.
I think that's a very dangerous way to. I mean, granted, for 500 years, for 200 years, country ran on a gold standard, and the finite nature of the supply of gold was one of the things that gave gold its value.
Which doesn't have a finite amount.
Against the dollar, which doesn't have a finite amount, but there's a cost in extracting it, where this does have a finite amount. So the answer is I'm in no position to judge.
Well, the nice thing is that you could be the smartest person on cryptocurrency and nobody knows what the use cases of this thing will actually be. You know what I'm saying? Like it is literally like the first days of like websites and the internet and everybody's, posting different stuff. I mean, we still have those NFTs and everything. Everybody thinks of NFTs as being those funny pictures, and that will likely be a completely different concept in 5 to 10 years.
But am I right? Those NFTs that were basically just that market has kind of.
Yeah, I honestly, I think the fact that you and I and most of the people who are right now talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum and these different networks aren't talking about NFTs at all. I think it has shrunk a lot. I can't quote any prices for you right now. But yeah, I guess this is all to say.
But if you do want your limited edition Frank Caberna NFTs, please reach out to me because I can part with some of those at very reasonable prices.
But yeah, we have no clue what the use cases are. It is getting unbelievable bid to it. Like I mean, you can't buy the thing; it won't stop. It won't move lower for more than 1 or 2 days, and for more than 5%, which seems like, oh, Frank, you're waiting for 5%. It moves with a volatility of around 3 to 5% on a daily basis, just hasn't been to the downside.
Well, and we talk constantly about news doesn't matter. It's backward looking. The unemployment number, yes, we'll get a move off of it on Friday. The number itself doesn't mean anything to me, and it really doesn't. But they appointed someone to run the SEC who is pretty much the polar opposite of what Gary Gensler was.
Sure.
Who is very pro digital assets and will be someone who will look to lessen some of the constraints around deployment of digital assets and use cases. Now, does that add real legs to something? Possibly. I mean, I tend to look at that, and I'm not as interested in selling something that's moved so much so quickly, because that means, number one, everybody who has is in a difficult spot.
Yeah.
And it seems like the gateway for opportunity for different kinds of tokenized products, different type of tokenized exchanges. One of the things of being able to transact frictionless, less costs. One of the things in some of we've done in our due diligence is the moving of networks and these fees and the gas costs are fascinating in a very murky market. It reminds me of trading FX 30 years ago, where it was very...
It's not cost effective right now.
What are the rates? And it's like, okay, I've got three counterparties. They all know my price. They all know my position, so I'm going to get shaded prices. A very non-centralized kind of transparent mechanism to it. That will come, but I think it's very interesting. But
I guess here's a question for you that I think can tie back into the traditional currency markets that tastyfx does offer, which is, do you think though that those costs, and by costs I mean you go, whether you're trying to do something on the Ethereum network and you're talking about gas fees for that, or you're trying to buy Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever, and then also transact on the Ethereum network, and you're talking about the spreads of those markets, and then the gas fees and everything else. Do you find a correlation, though, between the costs of an opportunity, let's say? And I'm not saying you should buy, sell, or make markets in cryptocurrency. You should do whatever. I'm just saying there's obviously a lot of price action in there, and there's a lot of seeming opportunity, whether you're talking about the news with Trump and who he appoints and everything else. Do you find a correlation between all of those costs and the murkiness, like you say? But 30 years ago in currency trading, there was more murkiness and there was more cost to do business, but you were in that market and doing a lot of business.
Right.
And so I can't help but get over to traditional currency markets and take a look at, an offering like tastyfx's, where the costs there are still costs, but relative to gaining exposure in cryptocurrency, the cost to gaining exposure in traditional forex markets, and maybe you can speak a little bit clearer to it, are lesser.
Relatively frictionless.
But there's less the euro dollar market, even though it's at a relative extreme of 105, has only really moved with a volatility of 5 to 10% the last couple of years. This Bitcoin market, I think it was last holiday season, right? It wasn't 2 years ago, where it was a $20,000 market. Or maybe it was 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, it was a $20,000 market. And in 2 years now it's a $100,000 market. And so it doesn't always go that way. The opportunity obviously can be both sides, or it can be both sides and sideways. But do you think there is a correlation there? Because it's still, to your point, it's this innovative technology in so many ways, and so many people are like, oh, it's the future of this, that, and the other thing. And I personally kind of agree with some of those things, but it is very hard to access right now.
It's very hard to access. There are a lot of, again, cost is friction to me. And that impedes before I'm right, I have to pay these fees, and then I have to be right to make money on it. And you want to mitigate the friction or the costs. So your ideas are basically you make money if your ideas are right, and you lose it if you're wrong, and you mitigate as many fees. Do I see in our future that you have Euro US, you've got Euro Aussie, and you've got Euro ETH to trade? Absolutely. I think those are things that will evolve into part of this tradable ecosystem. And I think the ability to bring those people, anything that gives you, and they've already done this part right. Now, we know the markets over the weekend are wide and kind of...
The markets during the day is wide.
Right, wide relative to, yes, to normal markets. Absolutely. Does all that, with more adoption, does that get... The more people you get in there and the more clarity you bring into how do I hedge this? How do I go to another exchange? And there are large firms that I used to work with that this is their business right now. And they are going down rabbit holes to really find every bit of edge. Because going into treasury arb like I did 30 years ago, or FX arb, or crude oil calendars, that market is saturated. It's as efficient as it can be.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of arbitrage opportunity. This is their next area of where they're finding edge in less than perfect pricing. And that as they find edge, they will compete, bring that clarity, and then they get greater adoption by the general trading community, and that brings in more volume to the
Well, because I guess,
so.
and the reason I rope it into, and let's throw up on the screen the tastyfx platform here just to see a little bit of what we're talking about. I mean, you look at this euro-dollar market, and it's this 0.8 pip spread is telling you essentially, if you wanted to be long euro, you have to be right by 0.8 of a pip, and a pip is the fourth decimal point here in this market. And so, I mean, essentially a fraction of a percent for this, you working against you to be right. When you look at buying, at least in my personal experience, when I look at major exchanges buying Bitcoin on Coinbase, Kraken, wherever, and you're talking about, okay, the market's 95K, all right? And all right, I want to buy it at 95K or, 95.05 or 95, that fraction of a percent. And then you go in and you try to buy whatever amount, and it's like, okay, you're long from 96.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's a different number.
Right.
That's more than a full percent, but I can't help but feel like an idiot. Not an idiot, because I don't think that necessarily it's, we hit 100 and it's a straight shot to 200. All you idiots that didn't want to pay, $1,000 in spread, you missed out. But I can't help but think that cost is right now, at least, kind of correlated to the potential opportunity on the long and the short side. Whereas, you're looking at a market that, like I just said, is quadrupled in the last 2 years. And here in Eurodollars, you're looking at a market that is in a 10 to 20% range the last 2 years. But the cost of trading it is a fraction of a percent. And so the markets are efficient. Of course, we always believe you should be diversified and be, you shouldn't take on a cryptocurrency if that isn't in your risk appetite.
Right.
Like my girlfriend, for example, she's like, well, should I have some of this stuff? And I'm like, leave it to me.
We have to talk about the fact that she put a kibosh on you getting life insurance. That's for another day. But that I found fascinating. That she said, no, it's not a good thing for you to do. So we'll talk about that at another case. But let's take a look at euro. Relatively flat, but we are up a little bit today. We'll run through yes, we're up. We're off the lows a little bit. Bonds are a little bit softer. U.S. equities continue to rally into the evening. It seems like where they would pull crypto around, crypto's now pulling U.S. equities around. It seems to be a little bit. Not much of a rally. The fact that they're not challenging anybody who's short here, even at 106, which you would have thought 3 weeks ago was a bad level to be short. It'll be interesting to see if we can build on these. It still feels very heavy in terms of, we traded up yesterday after
this is a nice bounce
after
here.
The French Parliament went through as much of the no confidence vote and everything. They got back below 105, but not much of a bounce here. So it'll be interesting to see.
I was going to say yesterday you saw this bounce from below 105 to above it. And then I think all of us were like, will it hold 105? Will they gain some steam here? And I don't think 105.30 is necessarily some steam. You would have to see today, if this market does sustain this and maybe gets closer to 106,
they need to challenge 106.
then you might see them challenge some of these shorts. If not, man, we're 100 pips away from these lows, and with non-farm tomorrow morning, we could see it if that number is in the U.S. direction.
You're absolutely right, and that will make a challenge of, do I want to carry my longs, which may be underwater or whatever, through non-farms? And that will, you'll either see us challenge 106 and trade a little bit higher, or bleed a little bit to the downside. So it'll be an interesting trade both ways around. But a lot to cover. Good talk today. Got to go check out that ice cream cone. Looks great. I may make a trip down there today.
Right now that it's 15 degrees and it's windy as all hell, I think it's a great day for an ice cream cone. I actually don't even think I don't think they're open this time of year.
Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.